Racist woman humiliates black man on plane, but when he reveals his identity, she is totally shocked. Karen Foster was seated in a spacious first-class seat on the flight from Los Angeles to New York. Dressed in an elegant designer suit, her presence exuded an air of confidence and superiority. With a critical gaze, she scrutinized the other passengers around her, assessing them as if they were pieces of a social puzzle. Next to her, her laptop was open, but her attention was fixed on David Carter, the man sitting in the opposite seat. He was the CEO of a renowned tech company, but to Karen, he appeared merely as an out-of-place man, engrossed in his work and oblivious to the world around him. "Look at this guy," Karen murmured to her assistant Lisa, who sat beside her. "I don't know how he managed to get a ticket in first class. Just look at him, he looks like he doesn't even belong here." Her voice was low but filled with disdain, and Lisa looked away, somewhat uncomfortable but unwilling to disagree. "Maybe he's working on something important, Karen," Lisa said, trying to soften the criticism. "Not everyone who travels in first class is a celebrity." "Important? For whom? All I see is a guy who doesn't know how to dress and clearly doesn't belong in this place," Karen replied, a smug smile on her lips. She couldn't comprehend how someone who looked so simple could be there. As the flight continued, David received a call. The screen of his phone lit up his serious face. "Yes, I'm on my way to New York for the meeting with the investor. We need to secure this funding for the project." He spoke in a firm tone, his voice filled with determination. Karen glanced quickly but didn't understand the seriousness of the conversation. With a disdainful look, she returned to focusing on her own work, jotting down notes for her presentation. "What could he possibly be doing? I bet he doesn't even know what a fashion trend is," she commented, oblivious to how wrong she was. Lisa merely shook her head, not wanting to engage in another discussion about the man next to them. She admired David's ability to stay focused and productive, even in such a distracting environment. As the plane began its descent, Karen looked out the window, absorbed in her thoughts. How did he even get a ticket in first class? She wondered aloud, not realizing she was once again judging someone without knowing their true story. "Maybe he saved a lot of time and effort to be here," Lisa suggested, her tone more assertive. "And who knows, he might be a tech genius or something like that." "A genius? He can barely communicate. Look at how he's dressed." "You can't take someone seriously who doesn't care about their own image," Karen retorted, already preparing to disembark. The plane began to land, and a wave of anxiety washed over her. The meeting in New York was crucial, and she couldn't allow herself to be distracted by a stranger. As the plane finally landed, Karen started to get up, ready to leave. Meanwhile, David was still on the phone, wrapping up his conversation before hanging up and preparing to step off. His image, with a serious and focused expression, didn't fit the narrative Karen had built in her mind. She was about to walk past him when a sudden idea struck her. This guy doesn't deserve to be here, she thought. It's absurd. But what she didn't know was that her narrow view was about to be dramatically dismantled. As the plane touched down smoothly at New York Airport, Karen's attention was on her phone screen, where she nervously reviewed the details of the meeting that awaited her. The fashion entrepreneur's mind was filled with plans and strategies. She rarely paid attention to the other passengers around her, but David Carter, who was still typing intently on his laptop, only caught her eye as a distraction. When the doors of the plane opened, the hustle and bustle of the terminal quickly filled the atmosphere. Karen stood up, adjusting her silk blouse and running her hand through her perfectly styled hair. But as she glanced at David, who was now standing and packing his things, she felt a mix of disdain and curiosity. "How did this guy get a seat in first class?" she murmured to Lisa, who was accompanying her. "Maybe he's here for work, Karen," Lisa replied, somewhat defensively. "You never know who might become a great business partner." Karen rolled her eyes, ignoring her assistant's suggestion. "Look at him. He doesn't fit the profile," she said, gesturing toward David, who was now moving away. "No one who dresses like that should be here. He looks more like a tech nerd than a CEO." Lisa just shook her head, but didn't dare to respond. What Karen didn't know was that David was about to receive a warm reception that would shatter her prejudiced view. As they exited the plane, Karen and Lisa mingled with the crowd of passengers. However, as they arrived at the terminal, the entrepreneur froze. A group of journalists surrounded David, who was being welcomed like a celebrity. "David Carter, could you tell us about your new projects?" one reporter shouted, while another held a microphone toward him. Karen's eyes widened, her jaw dropping as she saw his name emblazoned on a large banner in the background. "Innovation and Inclusion," the future of technology. "I can't believe he's actually famous," Karen murmured, her tone now a mix of confusion and irritation. "And why didn't anyone tell me about this?" Lisa approached David admiringly. "Hi, I'm Lisa. I'm Karen's assistant, and I'm a huge fan of your work. Can I take a picture with you?" She held up her phone while David, always kind, smiled and agreed. "Of course. It's always great to meet people who believe in inclusion." As Karen watched, an uncomfortable wave washed over her. She recalled the comments she had made during the flight and felt a chill in her stomach. "Don't you think he's a bit over the top?" she asked, forcing a smile, but Lisa was not willing to engage in the conversation. "Karen, he's doing incredible work, and you should be more open to that," Lisa replied firmly. "I think you need to rethink your opinions. Maybe you should follow your own advice," Karen shot back. But she couldn't hide the unease in her voice. What she had thought would be a trivial encounter was now turning into a moment of forced introspection. While David was saying goodbye to the reporters, his expression was a mix of humility and determination. He seemed genuinely passionate about what he did. "Inclusion is not just a buzzword, it's a necessity," he told a reporter who asked about his initiatives. "We're all in this journey together. Before we continue with this exciting story, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories, and let us know in the comments which city you're watching this video from." Karen, in silence, began to realize that her judgment might have been hasty. "Who are you, Karen Foster, to underestimate someone based solely on their appearance?" a voice inside her questioned. "Come on, we have to go," Lisa said, gently pulling her by the arm. "The meeting won't wait." But as they walked toward the taxi, the businesswoman couldn't shake the image of David and his words. Reality was unfolding before her, and the transformation that was approaching began to insinuate itself in her mind, challenging her beliefs and her way of seeing the world. The business meeting was about to begin. Karen Foster, with her usual elegance, adjusted her silk blouse and looked at the investor sitting across from her, a middle-aged man with a critical gaze. She knew she needed to make a good impression, but what really bothered her was David Carter's presence, who was there merely as a spectator, or so she thought. He seemed so out of place in that corporate environment, with his laid-back demeanor and slightly wrinkled button-up shirt. Karen couldn't understand how someone who didn't fit the standards she considered acceptable could be in the same room as her. "Do you really think he has anything to offer?" Karen whispered to her assistant Lisa, who was sitting next to her taking notes. "Look at him, he looks like he just got off the couch." Lisa, who admired David's ability to communicate with others, simply shook her head and replied, "Karen, you may not realize it, but he's an important figure in the tech sector. A lot of people respect him." "Maybe, but he doesn't look like he knows how to dress for the occasion," Karen retorted, her sarcastic tone echoing in the room. The investor, who had been studying the presentation, looked up and cast a curious glance at the two, but said nothing. The atmosphere in the room changed when the investor began discussing the importance of diversity initiatives in companies. "We're living in a time when inclusion is not just a buzzword, it is essential for business success," he said, looking directly at Karen. "We need leaders who understand and support this." Karen felt a chill in her stomach, recalling her hasty judgment about David. What she didn't know was that he had a life story filled with challenges related to discrimination. As the investor continued to speak, her mind wandered and she began to visualize David's childhood. What would it have been like to grow up in an environment that did not value his diversity? The image of a boy dreaming of making a difference but facing barriers made her feel a mix of empathy and discomfort. "Are you okay, Karen?" Lisa asked, noticing the change in her boss's expression, which seemed lost in thought. I don't know. This conversation about diversity is making me rethink some things," Karen admitted hesitantly. "I always thought that what mattered was talent and appearance, but what if there's more behind that?" As soon as David was called to present, the room fell silent. He stood up confidently, and contrary to what Karen had expected, his words were powerful and impactful. "Success should not be measured only in profits, but also in how we can uplift and support others along the way," he said, looking directly at each face in the room. "If we don't use our platforms to help those who don't have a voice, we are failing as leaders." Karen felt a lump in her throat. As someone who had always considered herself superior, she began to understand that she had never thought about how her actions could impact others. David continued to speak about his experiences, sharing stories of overcoming challenges along the way. "When I was a child, I didn't have access to the same opportunities that many of you had," he said, and Karen noticed his voice trembling slightly. But I found support in people who believed in me, and that's why today I dedicate myself to doing the same." As he spoke, Karen found herself reflecting on her own journey, her victories, and how she had often ignored the struggles of others. The investor and the other participants seemed fascinated, but Karen sat frozen, absorbing every word. She began to question her own beliefs and values, and the truth was that behind her confident facade, there were insecurities she had never acknowledged. After the presentation, the atmosphere in the room was filled with energy. People stood up to applaud David, and Karen remained seated, lost in thought. The idea of a future that could be different now felt more tangible, and for the first time, she felt willing to consider that it might be time to change not only her perception of David, but also what success really meant. After the lecture, the conference hall buzzed with energy. The chatter of attendees mixed with laughter and animated conversations. Karen, still dazed by David's inspiring words, hesitated before approaching him. She saw him talking with a group of young entrepreneurs, their faces lit up with enthusiasm and admiration. The fashion businesswoman felt somewhat out of place, as if she were in a world that wasn't hers. David noticed her and smiled, making an inviting gesture. "Karen, I'm so glad you came. Come, I want to introduce you to some young people you need to meet." His voice was warm and his gaze conveyed sincerity. Karen struggled to suppress an eye roll. The thought of mingling with those young people, who were far from her usual circle, made her nervous. "Hi, David, sure," Karen replied, trying to hide her hesitation. She stepped closer, and David introduced her to a group of 5 people, each with a unique story and challenges they had overcome. "This is Lucas, a software developer, and this is Sophia. She started a sustainability-focused startup," he said, moving from one young person to the next. "Hi, Karen. It's a pleasure to meet you," Lucas exclaimed, extending his hand. "I really admire your work in fashion. The way you position yourself in the market is inspiring." "Thank you," Karen replied, a bit surprised. "But you all are the real inspirations." Sophia, with a spark in her eyes, commented, "David always talks about the importance of inclusion and how each of us can make a difference. That motivated me to create my own company. I wanted something that not only generated profit, but also helped the environment." Sophia's words hit Karen like a punch to the stomach. Karen, who had always prioritized financial success, began to question her own priorities. "I never thought much about that," she admitted, a little embarrassed. "I guess I've always been too focused on, well, my image." David noticed the change in Karen's expression. "You know, Karen, success isn't just measured by how much you earn or the status you have. True success is about doing something that positively impacts people's lives." His words echoed in her mind. She looked at the group and saw hope in their eyes. "You're right. I need to reflect more on this," she said, feeling a new determination rising within her. After a few minutes, David pulled her aside, away from the others. "I have a charity event coming up and I would love for you to participate. I think you could help bring more visibility to the cause," he suggested, his gaze fixed on hers. "A charity event?" Karen repeated, hesitating. "I don't know. I'm not exactly a charity expert. But you are a leader in your field. Your influence can make a difference. Just imagine how many people you could inspire to get involved," David argued, his voice calm yet persuasive. Karen bit her lip, considering the proposal. The fear of change and stepping out of her comfort zone enveloped her, but there was something about David that made her want to give it a chance. "All right, I accept your invitation." "Great," David smiled, visibly pleased. "It's going to be an incredible experience, you'll see, and I'll always be here to support you." As they chatted, more young people approached, each sharing their stories and challenges. Karen listened attentively, each account more fascinating than the last. One of them, a young man named Felipe, spoke about how his startup was helping underprivileged communities gain access to technology. "I just wanted them to have the same opportunities I had," Felipe said, his eyes filled with passion. "I believe everyone deserves a chance to shine." Karen felt a lump in her throat. The touching stories were making her rethink her own path. For years, she had focused solely on her image and success without realizing the impact she could have on others' lives. "You all are amazing," she said, her voice a bit choked up. "You really make me want to be a better person." David watched her, a proud smile on his face. He knew that Karen was beginning to understand the true meaning of success. And as the conversation flowed, he remembered how her journey was just beginning. Karen sat in her office, surrounded by luxurious fabrics and fashion sketches spread across the table, but her mind was far away. The image of David, the CEO she had underestimated on the flight, lingered in her thoughts. Her assistant Lisa's words echoed in her mind. "You should reconsider your opinions about him." She felt uneasy with the idea that someone so distinguished and admired had crossed her path, and she hadn't recognized the greatness of his presence. The charity event David had invited Karen to was approaching, and she found herself torn. On one hand, she wanted to show that she could engage in social causes, but on the other, her insecurities and the fear of what others in the fashion industry might think paralyzed her. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Lisa, excited. "Karen, have you seen the event website? David is promoting an incredible initiative for young entrepreneurs," Lisa exclaimed. "We need to get involved. Do you really think this is something I should do?" "I don't know if I'm the right person for it," Karen replied, trying to hide her hesitation. "Of course you are. You have a huge platform, and this could be an opportunity to show that you care about more than just fashion," insisted Lisa, her passion infectious. Karen sighed, reluctant. "But what if I don't fit in? What if people notice that I'm just trying to save my image?" Lisa laughed lightly. "Karen, you don't need to worry about that. David is doing amazing work, and he truly believes in inclusion. You can learn so much from him." The conversation made Karen reflect once again on her attitudes. What led her to feel so superior, so above others? She decided at that moment that she would attend the event. "All right, I'll get involved, but if I do this, I want you by my side." "Of course, let's do this together," Lisa replied, enthusiastic. In the days that followed, Karen prepared for the event. She chose every detail with meticulous care, but as the date approached, her insecurities began to surface. She looked at herself in the mirror, adjusting her hair and makeup when David's image appeared in her mind once more. He was so different from her, so authentic, and that unsettled her. She wondered if she could be genuine alongside him. The day of the event arrived, and the venue was decorated with a vibrant and welcoming atmosphere. Karen and Lisa arrived together, and Karen felt a bit nervous seeing the number of young entrepreneurs gathered, all filled with hope and innovative ideas. David was animatedly conversing with a group, his presence lighting up the room. Karen took a deep breath and approached him. "Hi, David," she said hesitantly. "Karen, so glad you came." He smiled, and his smile seemed genuine. "I hope you're ready to be inspired." She smiled back, but insecurity still lingered. "I'm a little nervous. I don't know if I'm the right person to be here." "Everyone is welcome here, Karen. What matters is the intention to want to make a difference," David replied with an encouraging look. "You might be surprised by the stories you hear." As the event began, Karen watched him interact with the young people, listening to their stories of struggle and perseverance. Each account was a testament to resilience that touched her deeply. She realized that despite her privileged position, many of these young individuals faced challenges she had never had to confront. Later that night, while chatting with David in a quiet corner, he shared a bit about his own story. "I grew up in a neighborhood where opportunities were scarce. I learned early on that inclusion and diversity are essential for success. This is why I do what I do. It's not just about business, it's about impacting lives." "I had no idea you had been through all of this," Karen said, admiring his vulnerability. "I really need to rethink how I'm using my influence." "And that's a great start. Everyone can change. The important thing is to have the will to do it," David concluded, looking her in the eyes with sincerity. The conversation made her reflect on her own beliefs. She knew she needed changes, not just in her career, but in her essence. Karen decided she was willing to engage more with David's work, even if it meant facing her fears and biases. By the end of that night, she felt that a new journey was just beginning. David's charity event was in full swing, and the atmosphere in the hall was filled with pure energy and enthusiasm. Karen, who until then felt like an intruder in this unfamiliar world, watched intently as David interacted with young entrepreneurs. The room was full of radiant faces, each reflecting hopes and dreams, and Karen couldn't help but feel moved by their stories and ambitions. As a group of young people prepared to make their presentations, a young woman named Maya took the stage, visibly nervous. Karen held her breath as she adjusted the microphone. "Good evening, everyone. My name is Maya, and today I'm going to talk about how technology can change lives," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I come from a neighborhood where many think success is a distant dream, but I believe we can transform this reality with inclusion and innovation." The audience listened in silence as Maya shared her journey. the challenges she faced, the doors that were shut in her face, and how she found support in initiatives like David's. Her words echoed in Karen's mind, and she felt a wave of empathy forming. She remembered her own journey in the fashion world, and how many times she had overlooked the struggles of those who were not in her privileged position. "I'm not just an entrepreneur, I'm a dreamer," Maya continued, gaining more confidence now. "And each of us has the right to dream and be heard. We need leaders who inspire us to move forward, who aren't afraid to talk about equality and inclusion. That's how we will change the world." The applause erupted at the end of her presentation, and Karen found herself clapping along, tears in her eyes. David approached Karen, observing her. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice soft but with a hint of concern. "You seem touched by something." "Yes, I never thought I could care so much about someone's story that I don't even know," Karen replied, her voice trembling. "I think I'm finally starting to understand." David smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his face. "That's a good sign. Change begins when we start to listen and connect with others. Are you ready for that?" A silence hung between them, and Karen realized that David's question was not just about that night, but about a deeper transformation within her. "I'm trying to be," she said, hesitant but determined. "I always thought success was only about status and money. Now it feels like there's something much greater at stake." "That's right," David agreed, looking into her eyes. "True success is measured by the impact we have on people's lives, not just by what we accumulate. You can make a difference, Karen. You have a powerful platform." Karen took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the expectations she had placed on herself. "And what if I fail? What if I can't change anything?" she questioned, her insecurities bubbling to the surface. "Every great endeavor starts with a small step," David replied, encouraging her. "And if you fail, you learn and try again. What matters is that you're willing to try. Remember, even the greatest leaders face challenges. What counts is the intention and the action." In that moment, Karen felt a wave of gratitude. "Thank you, David, for showing me a new perspective. I really want to make a difference, even if I don't know exactly how yet." David nodded, a sparkle of understanding in his eyes. "We're all learning, Karen. We just can't let fear paralyze us. Together, let's transform this industry, and you can be a great ally in that change." With those words, Karen realized there was more at stake than just her career in fashion. There was a new mission, an opportunity to use her talent and influence for something greater. And as she watched David move among the young people, offering advice and support, she decided she was ready to take the next step in her journey of self-discovery and transformation. Karen looked around the conference room of her company with renewed vision. Natural light streamed through the large windows, reflecting the vibrant energy of New York City. The table, typically cluttered with documents and fashion projects, now held new meaning for her. After David's charity event, her mind was buzzing with ideas about how she could make a difference in her own industry. "Karen, are you okay?" Lisa, her assistant, asked, breaking the entrepreneur's concentration. The young woman looked at her boss with concern, noticing that Karen's expression seemed distant, as if she were somewhere else entirely. "I'm fine, Lisa. Just thinking about how we can change some things around here," Karen replied, trying to mask her vulnerability. "I think we're missing an opportunity to do something bigger than just sell clothes." Lisa smiled, excited by what she was hearing. "That's amazing, Karen. I've always believed we could do more. What do you have in mind?" Karen stood up and began pacing the room, gesturing as she spoke. "What if we created a clothing line that not only looked stylish, but also supported young designers from underrepresented communities? We could partner with them and give visibility to their work. That would be fantastic. We could use our social media to share their stories and highlight the importance of diversity in fashion," Lisa responded, growing more enthusiastic. "And who knows, we could even organize an event to showcase these new collections to the public." "Yes!" Karen exclaimed, stopping suddenly. "An event that not only showcases fashion, but also tells the stories behind each piece. We could invite David to speak about the importance of inclusion in the industry and how it can positively impact society." Lisa nodded, admiring Karen's transformation. "You're really inspired by him, aren't you?" "I am," Karen admitted, sitting back down with a shy smile on her face. "David made me realize that success isn't just about what you achieve, but about how you can help others on their journey." The following weeks were frantic but energizing. Karen and Lisa dedicated themselves to creating a new business plan that prioritized diversity and inclusion. They spent hours revising proposals and reaching out to young designers. The excitement was tangible. They were about to embark on a project that could change lives. "Karen, did you remember to send that email to the designer we met at David's event?" Lisa asked, while reviewing the task list. "Yes, I sent it last night," he replied, and is excited to collaborate. Karen responded, her eyes sparkling. "His name is Marco and he has an incredible vision. I can't wait to see how we can integrate his aesthetic with what we do." "That's great. What do you think about holding a meeting with all the designers we want to include in the new line? We can create a safe space for them to share their ideas and visions," Lisa suggested. "Perfect. That will make them feel valued from the start," Karen replied, filled with determination. "Let's make it happen." However, not everything was perfect. As Karen dedicated herself to this new initiative, she began to realize that her relationship with Lisa was changing. The assistant, now so motivated and inspired, was shaping into a leader in her own right. This new dynamic sparked a slight feeling of insecurity in Karen. "Lisa," Karen began hesitantly, "you've been really standing out. I'm happy about that, but don't you think you're drifting a bit away from me?" Lisa paused what she was doing and looked at her boss. "Karen, it's not that. I'm just excited. I feel like we can finally do something meaningful. You've inspired me to strive for more. I understand and I'm glad you're excited, but I don't want you to feel like you're just following me. You have amazing talent, and I want you to shine," Karen said sincerely. "And I want you to shine too," Lisa replied, smiling. "We're in this together, and I'm sure we can do something incredible. We can be a true team, each with our own space and ideas." Karen smiled at this. She realized that the change wasn't just about her own evolution, but also about how she could empower those around her. The idea of a collaborative future, where everyone could thrive, began to take shape in her mind, and she was determined to make that vision a reality. In the elegant conference room of David's new headquarters, an atmosphere of tension settled in. Now more confident, Karen watched as David's old rival Jonathan Reed entered the room with an arrogant smile. He had always been a shrewd antagonist, and his presence had the power to destabilize even the most secure. David's team was gathered to discuss the next steps of the project, promoting inclusion and diversity in the tech sector, and the last thing they needed was Reed's presence. "Welcome, Jonathan," David began, trying to maintain composure. "What brings you here today?" The tone in David's voice was firm, but Karen noticed a slight tension in his shoulders. Jonathan, in his perfectly tailored suit and a glint of disdain in his eyes, strode to the center of the room. "David, I thought you'd gotten rid of me, but it seems your project needs a bit of realism," Jonathan said, crossing his arms. "You know, the real world isn't as rosy as you imagine. People don't care about your inclusion initiatives." Karen shifted in her seat, feeling a knot form in her stomach. She glanced at David, who was visibly unsettled, but refused to give Jonathan the satisfaction of showing it. "We need more inclusion and diversity, not less," David said, his voice now stronger. "People are ready for this change, Jonathan. What you don't understand is that it's not just about numbers, it's about giving a voice to those who have been ignored." "Ah, of course. And do you really think this will make your shareholders happy?" Jonathan laughed, a cynical sound that echoed through the room. "If you want to succeed, you need to stop daydreaming and focus on what really matters: profit." The tension rose as Jonathan's words hung in the air. Team members exchanged worried glances, and Karen could feel the pressure building. She knew David needed support in that moment, but uncertainty about how to step up grew within her. She had learned so much about inclusion and diversity from David, and now, more than ever, she felt she needed to speak out. "Jonathan, maybe you're wrong about what matters to people," Karen said, standing up from her seat. "Companies that don't adapt to this new reality will fail. The world is changing, and contrary to what you say, people care about ethics and social responsibility." Jonathan's gaze fixed on Karen, surprised by her boldness. "And who are you to teach me what matters in the industry? A mere fashion entrepreneur? You know nothing about the tech sector. Maybe you should start thinking outside your bubble, Jonathan," Karen shot back, feeling stronger with each word. "What we're doing here is important, and it's not just about numbers, it's about lives. It's about creating a space where everyone can thrive, regardless of their background." The room fell silent, and Karen realized all eyes were on her. David smiled subtly, showing gratitude for her support. Jonathan, however, didn't seem willing to back down. "You're putting yourself in a precarious position, Karen," he said with a threatening tone. The people you're trying to support have no idea of the truth about the market, and I will make sure that becomes clear. If you truly believe that exposing weaknesses and destroying lives is the path to success, then you're weaker than I thought, Karen replied, feeling a surge of courage. True strength lies in uplifting others, not tearing them down. The tension in the room was palpable. Karen felt heat rise to her face, but now she was determined to defend David and what they represented. Jonathan, realizing he wasn't intimidating her, decided to leave, but not without casting one last disdainful glance. I just hope you're ready for the consequences of your choice, Karen. The world is crueler than you imagine, he said, exiting through the door. After Jonathan left, the room filled with murmurs and approving glances. David turned to Karen, his eyes shining with gratitude. You were incredible. Thank you for standing by my side. I only did what was right, Karen replied, still feeling the adrenaline from the confrontation. We need to do this together. This is bigger than us. Then, the tone of the conversation shifted, and everyone gathered to discuss how they could strengthen their efforts in promoting inclusion. Karen realized that by standing up for herself and David, she had committed not only to the project, but also to a new way of seeing the world. Jonathan's rivalry had not only united them, but also solidified Karen's determination to fight for the change she now knew was essential. Karen sat at her desk, her mind buzzing with the information she had just received. David's rival, Richard Lawson, a fashion mogul known for his aggressive tactics and lack of ethics, was moving in the shadows. Rumors about his unethical practices had begun to circulate, and Karen knew that if these rumors were true, they could threaten not only David's reputation, but also the young entrepreneurs he supported. She glanced at her laptop screen, where a series of text messages from Lisa awaited her. Karen, did you see what they're saying about Richard? This could be huge, one of the messages read. Taking a deep breath, Karen decided she needed to act. David's words echoed in her mind. Success is not just about money, but about making a difference in the lives of others. That idea was beginning to shape her new perspective, and she knew she had to use her influence to protect what was right. With determination, Karen called Lisa for a meeting. We need to talk about Richard Lawson, she said, her voice firm. He is about to cause some serious damage, and we can't let that happen. Lisa, who had become an ally and friend to Karen, nodded, her eyes filled with concern. I've heard rumors that he's trying to discredit David and his initiative. He won't stop there. We need to investigate further, Karen suggested, her brain already working at high speed. If we can gather concrete evidence of his unethical practices, we can expose him. This will not only protect David, but also show everyone that we're here to stand up for what's right. The two dedicated the following weeks to gathering information. They spoke with industry contacts, analyzed documents, and even conducted interviews with Richard's former employees. With each new piece of information, Karen's determination grew. She wasn't just fighting for David's reputation, she was also fighting for the future of the young people he helped. One morning, as they reviewed the latest information, Lisa sat up straight and said, Karen, we found something big. Richard has been involved in tax fraud and contract manipulation with suppliers. This is exactly what we need. The excitement and adrenaline were palpable. We have to act, but we need to do it carefully. If we're too impulsive, we could end up hurting ourselves. You're right, Karen replied, contemplating. Let's prepare a serious article, something that can be published on a respected platform. We need this to reach as many people as possible. Karen was determined to do the right thing, even if it meant putting her own reputation in the fashion industry at risk. That afternoon, as they worked on the text, Karen felt a wave of confidence wash over her. She was transforming. Instead of worrying only about her position and prestige, she was now focused on something larger. As she finished the draft, she looked at Lisa and said, Let's do this together. This is our chance to show that we're not here to play dirty. When the article was finally published, the response was immediate. Several media outlets began investigating the allegations against Richard, and Karen felt a mix of nervousness and relief. In one of her meetings with David, she told him about what she had discovered. David, I didn't want you to find out this way, but Lisa and I found evidence about Richard. He's involved in fraud and manipulation. I couldn't just stand by while you were fighting against this injustice. David looked at her, his eyes shining with a mix of admiration and surprise. Karen, you did what was right. This is so much more than I expected from you. You've become a true ally in the fight for change, and that is priceless. Karen smiled, feeling that for the first time she was truly making a difference. Every word she had written, every step taken in that direction, brought her closer to who she really wanted to be. And more importantly, she knew this was just the beginning. After exposing Richard's unethical practices, the atmosphere at the awards event was electrically charged. The hall, elegantly decorated with soft lights and exquisite floral arrangements, was filled with industry leaders, journalists, and influencers. Karen Foster, now more confident and determined, felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, but also the lightness of the transformation she had undergone. The applause echoed through the room as David took the stage to receive the award for his contribution to diversity and inclusion in the tech sector. Thank you, everyone. This recognition is not just mine, but of each of you who believes we can build a better, more inclusive future, David began, his voice resonating with sincerity. He looked out at the audience, his eyes meeting Karen's in the front row, a radiant smile lighting up her face. And I want to dedicate this award in a special way to someone who, despite her insecurities, had the courage to stand up and make a difference. Karen, you have become a true ally in the fight for inclusion. The audience erupted into a standing ovation, and Karen felt her heart race. She hadn't expected to be mentioned, and emotion washed over her. As David continued, we all have the capacity to change, to reassess our biases, and to become agents of transformation. And that is exactly what Karen has done. She not only apologized for her past comments, but also sought ways to use her influence to support young entrepreneurs and promote diversity in her company. After the ceremony, as the crowd began to disperse, David approached Karen. "You know this wouldn't have been possible without you, right?" he said, his sincere tone touching Karen's heart. "I just did what was right, David. But if it weren't for your inspiration, I might not have found that courage," Karen replied, a glimmer in her eyes. She felt different, lighter. The weight of arrogance she had carried for so long was beginning to dissipate. "You've redeemed yourself, not just in my eyes, but in the eyes of many who need leadership and positive examples," David said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "And believe me, this hasn't gone unnoticed. You've become a powerful voice in the fashion industry." Karen smiled, a genuine smile that reflected her gratitude and the recognition of her evolution. "I think I still have a lot to learn and do, but I'm willing to try. I want to be an ally, not just to you, but to everyone who needs support. And you already are. Let's continue this work together. Inclusion is a journey, and we need people like you by our side," David replied, his gaze firm and encouraging. The conversation flowed naturally, as if they had known each other for a lifetime. As they talked about future collaborations and projects together, Karen realized she was transforming not only into a more conscious businesswoman, but also into someone who truly cared about the impact of her actions. The empathy that once felt distant was now an intrinsic part of her. "Have you thought about how you could inspire others in fashion to join us?" David asked, raising an eyebrow. Karen paused for a moment to reflect. "Yes. I would like to organize a conference on diversity in fashion, bringing together young designers and entrepreneurs to show that true success isn't just about status, but about making a difference." "That's an amazing idea. We can work together to make it happen. Imagine the change we can create," David said, his enthusiasm infectious. And so that night, as the glow of the event's lights illuminated their faces, Karen and David were not only celebrating a victory, but also the promise of a new era of collaboration and empathy. By the end of the night, as they walked away together, Karen felt a wave of hope. She had avenged her rival, but more importantly, she had redeemed herself in her own eyes. The true prize wasn't public recognition, but the journey of transformation that led her to become a better, more conscious person. We've reached the end of this touching story. If you enjoyed it and want to see more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Right now, there's a playlist of videos on your screen. If you want to keep watching these heartfelt stories, just click on it and you'll start watching right away. And now, tell us in the comments where you're watching from and leave a like to support our work. Now for a sincere question, do you agree with what happened in the story? We want to hear your opinion. Until the next video.